Welcome to Misaka. The idea here is simple. It's viewing your life as a series of smaller lives, as a collection of different iterations of yourself, different lives you've lived within your own life. We call these smaller lives Misakas, and we look at them as a scientist would finding new species in the wild. So David and I are the world's first Misaka researchers. On today's episode, we dive into the sense of self and the idea of a soul, piggybacking on last episode when we stumbled upon this idea of the core Misaka, this larger overlord that connects to every other Misaka you create, and the idea of having a T-shape where you work on breadth and depth simultaneously. So I hope you guys enjoy, and welcome to Misaka.
Okay, so this is the best place that I could start. Are you familiar with, I think, one of the modern definitions of personality, which is that personality is just a pattern of behavior? Like, what makes... Okay, I'm going to describe to you Frank. Tell me Frank's personality. Frank... I just always lean to him being a terrible guy. Frank can be a good guy. You normally think of Frank as being a homeless dude. Okay.
See, I imagine, like, wife beater.
Yeah, that's so Frank.
Like sitting on the couch, balding, the room's dark, with like a kind of a blurry TV.
Yeah.
Where like the program fades in and out. And
there's a thin blanket over him, and he's hooked up to an IV. Okay, I mean, because you made it the lighting that you chose for the scene made it point to that. Okay, I got one. There's a guy named Jeremy, and Jeremy lives in a studio apartment and chain smokes cigarettes and draws. He's an illustrator. He's a comic book illustrator, and he has a girlfriend named Janine. And everyone is like, all their names begin with the letter J.
Obviously,
of course. And that's another pattern of his behavior. All right, come on. So, what is his personality? I mean, you could say like his personality is starving artist. You could say, I mean, you know what I mean. We could work semantics or whatever and try to figure out what the title of his personality is. But a better place to start would be, what are his basic habits? What are the patterns of his personality? What are his behavioral patterns? He wakes up in this way. He does these things. Does he eat regularly? Does he not? You know what I mean? And then you can draw points from that to a set of characteristics. So I'm starting kind of out with, what can I empirically see? And then we'll work our way in. I think that's a good place to start.
Okay.
So empirically, I can notice a pattern of behavior, and then I can associate that, even if I don't have a name for it, to a personality. And then you go further in, and you ask what causes these patterns of behavior. And I don't know how necessary it is to like try to describe, I don't know, his What are the basics of his neurology and his physiology and stuff? I think a better place to start would be, he has instinct and reward, so he can be conditioned, and he has the ability to observe and potentially think about what he's doing. And the idea that I think that if we're going to start with the idea of the self in a way that isn't woo-woo, overly philosophical, or too dense scientifically, is that his observations of his patterns of behavior and then his responses to that is the closest thing to a self that he probably has.
I mean, that's kind of how I've always looked at it too. It's like this self isn't this thing that it exists before you. It only exists in hindsight, or it's this sculpture you make from your decisions, and each decision you make is like a different brushstroke or a different chisel hit on the piece of marble, and eventually it creates this thing that is self.
Yeah, a very drunk person once said, I just think it's a great start to a quote. A drunk guy once said that you're a monument of yourself, and I think he was just arranging words together. But I mean, that's what I'm doing.
That's what we're all doing.
Yeah, I know. But But I thought that was cool because kind of the idea is, and riffing off your sculpture idea, the idea that's what made me think of it. It is just the thing that you build over time that you bear witness to.
Yes. Like we all start with this slab of marble, and sort of fitting it into the nature versus nurture. Like not all of our slabs of marble are shaped the same, and some slabs can be more easily turned into this shape than this shape. So like this slab could be turned into a Greek god. This one could be turned into an airplane because it's sort of the natural shape. It's easier to make a specific and a picture out of it. But it's sort of this amalgamous shape of marble, we'll call it, and then every decision you make is a hammer chisel that knocks a piece off of that and starts to create it into some form of self. And whether you know the picture you're trying to make beforehand or not, that's really where foresight would come in. But even if you just made decisions and kept looking back, you'll always see this sort of different picture because you're always chiseling away at different aspects of that block.
I think that your point that some shapes lead more naturally into other shapes is a really good point.
Yeah, I mean that's fitting the metaphor into the nature versus nurture, and I think they both play a role.
Yeah,
and we all have a shape that lends itself more to this and a picture.
Sure,
but you have the choice of what you actually want to make with it, and it's just harder if you want to make a picture that the shape doesn't lend itself to.
So then I think that maybe it'd be good to agree that's what...
It would be good to agree.
maybe the first place to start would be, let's agree with one another. Okay, we've established what personality is, and we've gone in and we've established, I think, basically what self is. Not philosophically, but to the degree that you can. There's an observer, and
we've explained it as far as a metaphor can explain it.
Yes, which is as far as that is. So, I guess how does that lead into Misaka's?
I mean, my first thought is that your core Misaka is sort of that general shape of the first piece of stone.
Okay, we have our central metaphor now.
Yeah, so like that. Yeah, we have something to make full circles on. We can loop back to, but it's sort of the shape, the picture that the shape lends itself to, could be the core Misaka. So like, maybe the shape for you has something to do with imagination, or that's like...
Maybe the other point about pattern of behaviors works, in that, okay, let's just look at it this simply. With the shape that you and I were given, which is not only determined by, right, our nature and nurture, so not only what we looked like genetically out of the mess, and then came out like a diseased prune and looked weird and all this gross stuff, but also the thing around us. So it was by my circumstance and how I came into the world that I would be bent towards imagination. I kept myself in a room, I thought a lot, I had books, I had to doubt my reality. Hence, my core from the birth of my neural network was imagination. And then yours would make sense, it would be challenging yourself because you had family, and you had social connections, and you had more people around you, and you had this like double-sided coin of a personality or pattern of behavior where you fucked around with a lot of stuff, but then you also tried to prove to yourself that or use that fucking up of stuff to do stuff.
Well, maybe I'm thinking now, because the core Misaka would have to overlap with sort of both the nature and the nurture, right? So just comparing it to the block of stone is just comparing it to the nature. And then it's these sort of behavior patterns and personality traits that you develop through your life and your circumstances. So maybe the core Misaka is when your behavior traits align with the shape of your stone. Right? So it's when I act in the behavior, or when I act in the way that is pushing myself sort of in line with this core Misaka, it's me making a more productive chip on that stone. It's making a chip on that stone that's actually creating the shape that it's meant, that it lends itself to being created. So it allows me to make a bigger chip in the stone, or it allows me to, I guess, like make a chip in the stone into like towards the shape it was like destined to become, or like it's meant to become, or it lends itself to being.
Okay. I was also thinking maybe an idea that may help you and I and people listening is that if you can identify a core Misaka and you don't relate to that one, the way to change it would be the Misakas at the end of the web points that are connected to that one. If you can try to create a bunch of them that are in a different direction, then you could push away from that. Like I couldn't just. What's a good memory? Because this is always helpful. Okay, when I was really young, I had a friend who lived close by to me, and every day I'd go and visit him, and we would craft entire worlds together, if not universes, and try to like establish the rules of the universe. And we'd spend 2 hours doing that, and then we'd spend about 30 minutes playing out the universe sometimes. But usually by the time we were done creating the world, we'd have to eat food. And then as soon as there's this giant dinner bell that his mom would ring, and then he'd run to his mom, and I'd run back down to my place, and the universe would just be erased away. Sometimes we'd continue them, but we'd never continue them for more than like a few days at a time.
It's like that Zen, the monk sand art where they create those giant things and they just blow the sand away.
It was like procedurally generated kind of too, where like it mattered, but it also didn't. So every time that I'd see him, because I saw him every day basically after school, we'd create an entirely new world. And there's that giant piece of like, so world building exercised the imagination thing. But what if I met with him every day and the core of mine was still being in my head and imagining and thinking, but every day on like a smaller habit tracker, just carved wood or did math or did some very like mechanics, like basic, work with machinery and stuff. Even if those were a bunch of small Misakas that were just skill based, like my machinery Misaka, my carving Misaka, my cooking Misaka, if I was learning to cook with his family or something, then I could push that away from the imagination thing. I think that's kind of the point, is that it's sort of like how many to what order of power is one Misaka to another, and then if one is powerful enough, if it's practiced enough, it becomes kind of a core. Which is still an assemblage of a lot of other things, but that's kind of the idea, right? Is that the way that you make a Misaka stronger is you attach many points to it. So if I pick one Misaka and then I attach 4 more Misakas to it, if I'm trying to improve imagination, say, I might do world building Misaka. I might do creative writing Misaka, which is connected to the creative writing one, if not a subset of it. I guess my point is that I think how you end up having a core is that you establish a central piece in a hierarchy of patterns of behavior.
Yes, it's the one you find that everything links back to.
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of what you said the other day about how you wanted to be the jack of all trades, but it was too many things. So you sort of found the T-shaped skill, which was writing, which allowed you to experience all these other things by using your imagination, but by also building that skill of writing. Mm-hmm. Like your imagination Misaka is the T-shaped one, where everything else is working inside the realm of its reach. But by working on all those other ones, you're still going deeper with the T, with the base of the T in that imagination Misaka. So it's like the thing that everything... It's the one that encapsulates all the other ones, that they all fit inside of. It's like the world that all the people live on. Yeah.
I don't know. There's this other part of it that's maybe a little bit less gratifying. Oh, sorry. Talking slightly out loud, so I'm referring to something that I didn't start the sentence with. There's something to saying the core of the Misaka thing isn't a magical thing. Like, I can use a metaphor to say that it's magical, but the core of it is mostly just patterns of behavior and patterns of thinking, for sure. And I consider thinking behavior as well in different ways. or your thinking has behavior. Part of me wants to say, like, the core energy of Misaka's is this ethereal thing that we don't even know about yet, and that's next episode. But I can't. What I can best say is the core of the Misaka thing is explained by the T-shaped metaphor you just made.
Oh, so you're saying, like, it's all these behaviors that we're noticing and we're able to link them back to a theme. It's not this ethereal energy source that's spawning Misakas. It's just saying, look at all these Misakas, they link back. So it's saying they...
it's like the most empirical approach.
Yeah, it's almost like trickle up instead of trickle down. Like it's all these things that are you're linking together by like things that like ways that you act and certain behaviors you have and certain actions that you take, and it's saying like this is just a pattern that links that they all fit.
Yeah, I guess I'm describing it as that, and we can go deeper if we want, but I'm describing it as that because that's like the safest dimension to reside in. Like, okay, and I'm not talking about dimensions in terms of physics, I'm just using that as a word, but surprise, words. But I guess I'm saying that it's observable, and because it's observable, that's like the one point that I could say is probably true. That's the best way I would describe the root of Misaka. And the other thing I'd like to say is that...
well, it also fits in our initial definition of the sense of self, where it's something that only exists in hindsight. So you have all these behavior patterns and certain actions you take and certain ways that you act in the world, and when you look back and follow the line back, like connect all the dots, that creates the sense of self, rather than saying it's this thing that's pushing you forward. It's saying like it's just the pattern recognition you have when you look backwards and think about your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But somehow that doesn't satisfy me.
Okay, so let's go further.
Yeah, because like there's even if that were true, there's a part of me that doesn't want it to be that.
For sure.
Like I want to be led by this like ethereal energy source, like this core something that's there.
Okay. Just say some stuff and I'll
I guess what I'm saying is I don't want it to be science, I want it to be magic. So yeah.
Oh god, yeah, me too. Well, it was like okay. So we can make it magic, but it's not going to be the face value magic that you find in discovering the Force or something else, right? Where remember back a few episodes, not as clappy as last time. Remember back a few episodes when we talked about how you will take the mythology, you'll take the story that involves magic over what we describe as like
the folklore over the scientific
fact.
Explanation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we talk about blending the two. So you use the magical thing as motivation for just making observations about reality and then testing those observations against each other to see whether or not they seem proof.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. You could still use the scientific method on these theoretical concepts.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an answer that might...
Which is basically what Misaka is.
Might engage you. I want you just to come up right now of any example of media ever of magic.
Of media magic?
Oh, not media magic. Media magic. It definitely sounds like a Photoshop tool. Or something. Okay. Think of a movie with magic in it, and just pick it, and just share it with me.
I mean, easiest would be Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, perfect. Okay, pick a spell.
Wingardium Leviosa, that's the one that makes things levitate.
Okay, so like telekinesis.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, it's just like making things levitate.
Okay. All right, magnetism. There you go. No, okay, right? Now, it sounds shitty because it's
like
just
explaining the magic with science.
No, not explaining it. Proving that magic does exist. And that magic...
Okay. Like some, you can make some... Like, they make beds that float with magnets now, where it floats off the ground. Yeah.
Sure. But, like, think about this. Like, it may just seem like perspective, but if you look at your phone, someone once described it as, it's lightning in a rock.
I feel that.
Which is really cool. And I think this is the problem.
Well, now I kind of want to think of a bunch of different types of magic and have you say
how they like
the science equivalent.
Okay, go for it.
So what would be the first thing that pops in my head is like a seance, like communicating with the dead.
I mean, okay, so there's a few different things there. A telephone in a funeral home. I'm kidding. Okay, I'm kidding. Terrible. This is really bad. Okay, here, let me give you a better example.
God damn it. To me, I would think of a memory.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Why am I like patting you on the head? Sorry, I don't know. Good job. No, that's really fucking good. That's way better than what I was gonna suggest.
A fucking telephone.
Well, no, because I was gonna say a multi-dimensional theory, like many dimensions. That would be hypothetically possible, but maybe the more grounded thing, because even like if you get further into like quantum mechanics or something, it's like just about like just almost agreed upon as being pseudoscience, because it's like fucking increasingly.
This almost feels like we're creating like setups for riddles. Like if I was like, so a magic thing could be like time travel, and then I would say like a photograph.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like we're creating a really simplified setup with a riddle answer.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So, just give me one more so we can kind of.
I like the telekinesis one, being able to read thoughts or communicate telepathically.
Telepathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just imagining telekinesis, but with thoughts, where you rip them out of their head. Okay, so telepathy. How would you do telepathy? Let's see. What's the closest thing to telepathy?
I don't know.
Well, actually, the closest thing to telepathy. Okay, so we're doing this thing though. We're not just saying like there's just a fucking 1-to-1 translation. Okay, Stephen King said that writing was telepathy. You're reading my mind in part when I speak to you.
Am I?
To a degree.
I guess to a degree. Well, how's writing telepathy?
Writing. I mean, because think about this. This is what's kind of cool. You know how like I'm saying words to you right now? You know? Like, are you repeating the words back in your head, and can you hear them repeating back in your head? Probably not.
No.
Yeah, because that'd be time consuming, but
yes,
and also distracting. When you're reading a book, though, are you at all repeating those words? Like, are you thinking the words into your brain?
Yes.
There you go. And so another guy sat there and he wrote,
and is putting words in my head.
Yes.
Ah.
Which is, I think, one corollary. I guess my point is...
Yeah, well, you could also, like... if I said... a fat man taking a shit on a goat. You picturing that?
Yeah, right? It's kind of just putting thoughts in my head. Okay.
I mean, that's a form of telepathy.
Maybe that is right. It goes both ways.
I've taken mushrooms and been able to communicate telepathically with my friends.
Title card.
Like we've like literally been able to like look at each other, and I could like I knew what he was thinking. Like I could just like I could he would be like look at the sky right now, and I could like I knew that's I don't know, like I didn't necessarily hear the words, but I could look in his eyes and knew that's what he was thinking and wanted me to do.
Right. Was he looking up?
No, he was looking at me. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is that you can get your magical resolution without having to have it be unexplained. Like, the reason why magic is so cool is that it has some ambiguity around the edges. It's far enough outside of what feels provable. That's what makes something feel magical. And that would be what would be really enticing about there being a core Misaka and an energy responsible for it.
Then I guess the best magic parallel to our original concept of like what is this core Misaka and what is creating these other Misakas and like where does it all come from is the sense of a soul.
Yes.
And that's sort of like it's this thing outside of the physical objective realm that exists and is again it's the life force that brings forth all of these other things that we're capable of doing and are. I
still like the idea of a soul.
So would the core Misaka kind of be your soul?
Yes is a more satisfying answer. I mean, is the question... Because the question could be, are these two concepts similar? Is the idea of
They are similar.
Right? How similar are they than that? But then, if I'm saying that like a soul is a thing that can be actualized, like I can see it before me, or I can hear it, or whatever. That'd be a very different question. Do you get what I mean? Like, to ask, are these two concepts similar? Is absolutely. To say, is the second one, soul, provable and then related to that one? No. So I can say that both of the concepts are similar, and that thinking of the core Misaka as a soul.
But to me, soul feels bigger. It feels more encapsulating than what a core Misaka is.
I think part of the trouble is that, like, I feel like if I was to answer the questions more, I'd be bending further and further towards abstraction, which is maybe part of the point of having the conversation about what gives birth to a core Misaka.
I don't think we're capable of not eventually getting to that. Like, we tried to go with the full objective reality path, and neither of us were satisfied with the conclusions we came to.
Okay, so
I think the key is to ease into it.
Okay.
Rather than just fucking no lube.
Yeah.
Balls deep, you know.
Right. Let's. Oh, I know.
We're starting with foreplay is basically what's happening.
Okay, just like heavy petting.
Yes.
I just thought of a synonym for foreplay. Okay. All right. So what?
Like let's peel one layer off towards abstraction.
Okay. What's the question again?
We were talking about the sense of soul and how that it seems more encompassing than to be simply defined as like that equals core Misaka.
Right.
And you said you don't know how to go about it without adding more layers of abstraction.
Right.
So do you want to just jump in how you would have without any sort of preface?
Yes. I know. Here's the problem is that I know like a bunch of pointers that could.
All right. Do you believe in a soul? Do you believe we have a soul? Do you believe in the concept of a soul?
I don't believe in how. There is no account of a soul that I've ever read or been told that I believe in. I think there are forms of it that I think that I believe could be possible, but mostly not possible, but cool.
What a sentence that was, sir. Like?
The soul is, like your... Okay, first one being your soul is your brain, which is pretty straightforward.
But see, I always have that like, your brain is the physical thing that sits in your head, and I always thought like your soul would be your mind.
Yeah.
And I don't think those are the same things.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm being a little testy. I'm being a little bit stubborn about this question because I feel I'm avoiding giving you real answers. I don't know why. I think I'm sensitive about talking about this.
You're filtering yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're trying to stay in some understandable place.
Okay. Let's go.
But that's
there.
not you, bro.
Let's go there, man. Thanks. Okay.
Give us a dose of that imagination.
Sure. God. Why have I read about Node.js all day today? This is probably the reason why.
That's code nerd stuff, by the way.
Okay, so I don't know. I can't think right now about it. I can't give you anything that isn't like slightly.
Well, what do you think? So, do you
autistic.
agree that there's a difference between the brain and the mind?
Yes.
What's that difference?
The mind is an emergent property of the brain. In that.
That's what comes from the brain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, the mind is anything from a complex series of chemical reactions to that plus a lot of hard to follow physics plus other stuff. I mean, that's how I would describe the difference, and the idea that like you have form and then you have function, and the brain would be form and then function would be what would create the mind. So maybe what would be the equivalent for the soul? And then I think the best thing I could say is that maybe the soul is the shell that holds the mind. And I don't mean the shell because you would say the closest thing to holding the mind as a shell would be the brain, would be the putty. But I think of the soul because the way that it's been expressed in film and entertainment and how people have talked about it is you always see this like kind of like moving, not smoke, but like this like
wispy
energy, and it's being like drained out of a fucking character or something, like this weird Mortal Kombat death scene. But to me, I think of the soul a little bit differently, and that I think that it has some integrity that's been built around it. Maybe the best way to describe that would be maybe the soul is a container, and in that container is a different substance every time for every person. Or you could go further, and you could be like the soul is the inherent ability for I can't go super imaginative right now. It's gonna be straight logic tonight, folks. It's gonna be just that.
So I always liked the idea that the soul is to the human body as electricity is to a computer, where it's like there's this physical structure that exists, and the soul is this sort of current and energy that when you run through this physical system gives it the power and the energy that it needs to do the thing that it like to do the thing that it needs to function, to do the thing that it was built to do.
I think that's really good. I think the trouble though is it's like the same way that we described science magically, we're describing a spiritual term scientifically, where I'm about to, and that I mean,
well, it's exactly what we did before. In
the same way that a computer is powered by electricity, a human is partially powered by electricity, and the equivalent I would have of a soul for every person would be maybe what we could say is that the energies and the states of those energies and as described in physics that allow for people to move and act and think and speak and fart, whatever, those energies are actually not like harnessable, like really, like you can't really harness it from anything. Like we claim that we see it, we claim that we see it act, we claim that we see this middle point between processes happening, between something igniting, and then and then flames everywhere. But maybe the fact is that that's how the soul works. It's just from thing to thing, right? That the only way that the soul can be actualized is in a form. So maybe the idea is that these core energies that we talk about, just electrons getting excited, those are the magical properties that make up the soul. So maybe the whole idea of a soul is a form being charged or motivated by these pretty unexplained energies, you know? Because I think that's close to the idea that I like too, is that the soul is actually not to itself, that the soul requires a host, kind of, and that is actually what makes a host, and why it makes it hard to describe a host. So I think then you could argue that every matter, everything of matter, is powered by a soul, you know? I think that's pretty close to my definition of a soul.
I agree. I mean, I agree with that. It is too, like what is electricity before it's harnessed? Like it requires a tool to pull it, to generate it from sort of the natural existence of things, and then it can be harnessed and channeled into something that is able to be powered by it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anything, like I don't think a rock has a soul. I don't think like a rock is something that's designed to be powered by anything. Mm-hmm. But a human is, just like, you know, the ceiling doesn't have any use for electricity running through it, but a laptop does. Mm-hmm. So there are these sort of like divine creations that are able to harness this energy that needs to be pulled from somewhere. Mm-hmm. So God exists.
Another title card. Huh. So relating it back to Misakas then.
I think the core Misaka is that current of energy, is the electricity.
Okay.
And it's the power source that runs through any other Misaka that's created, that gives it the energy to enact its function. Mm-hmm. And you said it doesn't really have a place, but it moves through all these things. So they're able to do the thing that they were created for. So in the way it is, it's like a soul is the electric current, is the core Misaka.
Right.
And it's this thing that we don't really know where or why, but it's a power source.
Okay, so maybe what we're saying is that there's a series of places that keep going back, and we describe the first one as a soul. Like that, and this place that I'm describing in this hypothetical has reoccurring traits. Like for a soul, the reoccurring trait is that it's this ethereal energy that requires a form, and then it breathes life into this form. And then those same qualities exist for a Misaka, but instead of it applying to physical form, you're applying it to concepts that motivate you to do things with your body.
But the concept, but the Misaka thing is creating a physical form for a concept. I mean, it's not actually a physical form, but it's imagining it in a way where it is a physical form.
Yes.
So it's as close to that as you can get. Like you're viewing it as a physical form, even if it's not.
Right.
It's a physical form structure. It's an imagined physical form structure for a concept, for an idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would have the same sort of energy pattern as a physical form would. Whether it's electricity in a laptop, whether it's the soul in a body,
you were really describing the Misaka as a physical character, while I just fucking completely was missing that.
Yes,
and not thinking about that.
That's the point, is to create a physical character, even if it's not actually physical, but to view it in that way.
Yeah.
So the same rules would apply to it.
Okay, do they have to?
I think for the concept to work, yes.
Okay, why?
Because if the goal is to put it in a physical form, so it's more relatable and easily understandable.
Okay.
And if the same rules didn't apply to it as do to a real physical form, it would eliminate the purpose of the concept. It would eliminate the reason to create the physical form, to make it more relatable and understandable.
Okay, so why
the same rules need to apply to keep it in this frame where it's easy to understand.
Okay, so then why don't we just say that?
Like it's simplifying complicated concepts.
Yes.
Into a place that's really relatable and understandable,
Yeah.
which is a life, another person,
Yeah.
a physical form.
Yeah.
And all the rules that apply to an actual life, an actual physical form need to apply to this as well.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise why have this concept? Why there it loses its value. It loses it doesn't, it's not a value machine anymore.
Okay. So then, relating the same idea of a soul back to a Misaka, how does that energy create more Misakas?
It's not that the energy creates more Misakas, right? Like, electricity doesn't create the laptop.
Right.
And the soul doesn't create the body.
Okay.
But it's the thing that powers it. It's the thing that gives it the current to move the joints and to make the programs run and to do all the things that it allows. It gives it the energy. It gives the form the energy to function, to create the function.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you
not that
want to
it's
think about
creating the Misakas, it's that it's allowing them to function.
Okay. What if we said that the parts that constitute the soul for a human body are those things equivalent to electricity?
Yes.
And then what if we said that the things that are equivalent to the soul of a Misaka are thoughts, which are best translated into electricity?
Say more about that.
So the idea is that, right, the reason why I can my leg can seize up, why my muscles can tighten, is specifically because of electricity and nerves. So my brain tells me, tells them, a bunch of motor neurons communicate to each other in my brain, and they tell me, hey, move my leg, and then you move your leg, right? So I mean, that is not strictly powered by electricity, but I mean, it's chemical and electrical. And then, in the case of a Misaka, right, so that same process is ongoing, and in a sense, I can't perfectly explain that chemical and electrical reaction. Even somebody who knows a lot more than I do probably could, but still couldn't perfectly, right? So then we could say that is the soul. Or at least we can relate conceptually to the idea of a soul being the thing that we just described, and best relating to it from metaphor to literal things as electricity to the human body. Okay? So now picture that there's a Misaka that's literally in your brain, like you could look in your brain, it's like a physical space, or you can just imagine a physical space. The way supposedly that I'd be able to visualize a Misaka, which is like a little person, is the same process that powers my body electrically. So you could say then that the soul of the Misaka, right, is me, kind of like a god for it, giving it electricity, right? So then what is the power that moves forward Misakas? My soul. My soul powers the soul for the Misaka, and so forth.
It's the...
But let me hear. Okay, hear me out here. Let's say that every thought that I had that contributes to a Misaka being a Misaka. It's the imagination Misaka. Like every time that I visualize an alien world, just very detailed, vivid alien world, it contributes to my ability to visualize, which is ability to imagine. Okay? And what if all of those thoughts were the things that were feeding the Misaka? That were allowing the Misaka to grow stronger, to live and to grow up and die. Right? So in a way, the sustenance that I'm giving the Misaka, the life energy that I'm giving the Misaka, is how I think about it. If I think about it, how the frequency that I think about it. So my thoughts are the life force for the Misaka.
Okay, that works better for me. Yeah, I mean, there's no way to go around that because it is just a concept. All you can do is think about it.
Yes.
And the more you think about it, the more you can develop the concept. Because I guess what it is at its core too is it's almost a reason to meditate on your life and to look back on, like, to sit and think about your life and apply patterns to different versions of yourself that have existed in your life. So it is, I guess the concept is a reason to think, and every time you think, it allows you to develop the concept more.
Mm-hmm.
To come up with more Misakas, you have to think about them, you have to think about your life,
Mm-hmm.
you have to start to categorize things. Yeah, it is. It's kind of like the currency. So what I'm thinking about now is the idea of when a Misaka reaches adulthood and you no longer have to sort of think to give it its energy. Like, what does that change? Like,
So when it becomes self-sufficient.
yes, like when let's say I have my discipline Misaka, and when it's in its infancy, I'm always having to think, like, okay, what's like the most disciplined thing? Like, okay, I need to lay down a pattern for this discipline Misaka to follow. Like, I need to think about what I need to give it. I need to feed it and bathe it and clothe it. And then when it becomes an adult, I no longer have to think what's the disciplined choice. I have this almost instinctual gut reaction of, like, I can just do it. I can just do.
Well, I think that's pretty straightforward. In that, okay.
But if I'm no longer having to think about it,
Yes, I know.
how is thought the thing that powers it?
So
How is thought its electricity?
okay, so say I'm imagining a red ball. And I think about it for like 10 seconds. All right. And say I keep thinking about the red ball, I keep on thinking about the red ball, I keep on thinking about the red ball, and then I think about the red ball bouncing in a park, like underneath a basketball hoop. And then I picture that basketball hoop in a city. And I keep thinking about the red ball throughout. If I just think about the red ball the first time, and then 30 minutes later you ask me, can you remember the red ball? There's a chance I might not be able to. This is I know this seems very straightforward, but it's going to lead to something. Which is that after you've started practicing using one Misaka, thinking about one Misaka, when you're teaching it how to eat and shit on its own and clothe it and all this other stuff, what you're doing is you're just thinking about a concept and you're practicing and or failing it or not. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're doing it intentionally or not. But let's say you choose actively to have a particular Misaka do something. Like I have the archery Misaka, practicing a skill. Yes, you start with thought, and that's the life energy for it. But what ends up happening for the Misaka is its experience that you apply it to, its applications, its tools that are attributed to it, the connections attributed to it, back to the hierarchical tree thing, to the T-shaped thing, are the things that keep it alive. Now it has the tools to feed itself, to hunt, to do, etc., etc., etc. So, in the same idea that memory acts hierarchically as well, and that the more associations that you have to one thing, the higher your chances of remembering that. Now, if you stop thinking about that thing, but you can still remember it, does it mean that you're not remembering it? No, you are remembering it, and you can probably better do it explicitly at that point instead of just implicitly sometimes remembering it, because...
So it's just that you need less thought to get there now?
No, I think the idea is that it becomes a truly autonomous process. That thought was the first thing that...
So it's almost like creating another smaller brain that runs on its own. Like, it's still your thoughts powering it, but it's not connected to your main.
Yes, I know.
What it kind of is
consciously
actually...
having to fuel it.
It's when these things are in their infancy and childhood, they are part of your conscience. That you're consciously, actively thinking about them. And when it reaches adulthood, it moves into your subconscious. So it doesn't... I mean, it's weird because I don't associate thought with my subconscious, but it is still the same thing in your brain It's the same process in your brain.
Here's the other thing that's even more interesting to me, which is that if you start working on something right now consciously, and then time passes, and then it becomes an autonomous practice, it becomes a subroutine for your subconscious, but you can still retrieve it and think about it consciously if you want. That's cool. The idea, though, is that eventually that'll become something that you did, or just passed, or the way that you apply it in real life will become the memories that you later look back on. But here's the idea, though, that in the same way that you want to get to a point where Misaka gets autonomous, part of the fun part of this concept is the reason why you use a Misaka is to look back at your life. Now, those are moments in your life that you never trained to actually be part of that autonomous Misaka, or making that Misaka live or die or something. If I don't look back on a memory, it's the same thing as the positive of choosing to push forward a memory with Misakas. You know, that on both sides, the idea is to look back to move forward, right? I look back on a trend in my life and I attribute that to a Misaka, and then I either choose to recognize when that Misaka lived or died, to use it for later research for other Misakas, or I continue to push it on forward. But if I don't look at those memories, then the Misaka doesn't eat, it doesn't grow. But it's funny, right? Because you want to look back at memory, but you also want to push forward the Misaka to where it no longer becomes just a tradition of repeatedly forcing yourself to do it. It becomes its own thing. It becomes a memory.
Well, it's I mean, that's all just the simple fact of adding consciousness to the Misaka.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of see what you're saying. I mean, it's really the same thing as creating a habit.
Sorry, that was a really good point on your end. That's the perfect metaphor for when a Misaka becomes an adult, as it becomes self-aware.
It becomes subconscious.
No, it becomes a subconscious routine for you, and that you no longer have to consciously fight to prove it to yourself that you know it, or fight to prove it into habit. No, the Misaka in concept is no longer a child. When it lives from infancy to adulthood and old age and dies, but it's not until it becomes self-aware, hence or thus whatever, subroutine. So it becoming a subroutine in your subconscious is when the Misaka conceptually becomes
adult.
Self-aware.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it's self-aware, then it gets,
because that's when it becomes an adult. Like, that's when it can do things without you having to. Well, I'll say not having to think about them, but it's now in your subconscious, so it's sort of running on autopilot. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to say. It's the same thing as forming a habit, where you need to do something on repetition for 30 days. And every day you have to be like, okay, I need to do this thing, I need to do this thing, I need to do this thing. And as that time goes by, it gets a little easier to do because it becomes habitual, and then it becomes part of your subconscious, where you then can just do that thing without having to think about it. Mm-hmm. Like practicing this riff on guitar every day for 30 days, and then I could just do it. Mm-hmm. And it almost leads me to the idea of creating sort of a flow state in yourself. Mm-hmm. Where you're able to get out of your own way and just let like I almost think of it as the conscience is the moon eclipsing the sun, and it blocks its light. And when you can sort of move your consciousness out of the way, you expose more of your subconscious and like let that light shine down, and it'll just happen if you can just move the moon from the path of the sun's light. Mm-hmm. And a flow state is kind of that, where you're moving your consciousness out of the way of your subconsciousness and letting these things that are sort of, you've trained in yourself and on autopilot, like letting them move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of like the routines become your thinking in a way. Or, I mean, I guess that ends up being what a flow state is that
it's not thinking is
mm-hmm.
the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I keep having trouble with the idea of as thinking as the thing that powers these things, because I so disassociate the idea of thinking with subconscious and with flow states. Like, those are all the times when I'm not thinking, when I'm just like completely immersed in the moment. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I'm letting the soul or whatever the energy source is just channel through unblocked and unhindered, mm-hmm. rather than thinking about instead of thinking about what I'm supposed to do, I'm just doing it. Like there's this weird, I don't even know how to explain it, but I mean, you're nodding like you understand.
Yeah, I do. No, I do. I get it. I mean, I guess my only problem with that is that thinking doesn't have to be kept to, like, when I'm thinking
it
about
doesn't have to be an active state.
Yeah, or
well, I'd love to hear your idea of what a subconscious is. Like, what is that to you? Like, and how is it different from a conscience? Like, what are the delineations between those two things? Because I don't know.
Yeah. I have a fun one, just because this is a fun way to describe it. Only because of that. Imagine if there's like this giant mothership, like it's space. It's like Battlestar Galactica or something, and it's like just slowly moving down through the multiple atmospheres of this planet, and it's this sand planet. Sand's whipping and stuff, and it opens up one of its little things, and out comes a little kind of drone, little sphere, the little blinking light kind of eyeball, and it shifts around and stuff. And that drone is sent out, and its sole mission is to scan the planet and observe and pull data from its environment and stuff like that, and even pull back data from the ship if so necessary. And back on the ship, there are a million blinking lights, a million processes going on, but none of those are necessary enough to overqualify for what the drone is doing in that given moment. And to me, the difference between the subconscious and conscious mind is the conscious is the drone and the subconscious is the ship. That's the best way I can describe it in metaphor.
I like the idea because that kind of fits my like moon eclipsing the sun, where the subconscious is the larger thing of the two.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, I think that helped me a little bit actually, in that they're not separated in function at all. It's just one. The tasks have become so they're so small in scope that they don't register within the, like the task in the subconscious is so small it doesn't register within the conscious. Like it's almost like how there's air all around you, but you don't feel it.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor.
And that it's you know, when the wind blows, you'll feel it on your skin because there's an active force applied to it. But when it's just in an inactive state, it's almost unnoticeable and invisible.
Yeah.
And that's what you're kind of doing when you build a habit or when you grow a Misaka. Comparing it back to muscles again, when you work a muscle, carrying the same weight becomes lighter. And it's almost like, let's say if I start by curling a 5-pound weight and then I keep upping the weight until I'm curling an 80-pound weight. If I go back to that 5, it feels like nothing. It feels like just moving my arm up and down. And that's really this. I think that's what you're doing. Is you're once it gets to adulthood, doing the work of what that Misaka is supposed to do is like lifting the 5-pound weight, to where your brain doesn't need to actively register it. It just feels like it's lifting nothing. Interesting.
Yeah,
that helped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
somehow your weird fucking alien probe.
I don't know why. Like, well, yeah, I'm glad. I mean, that's cool too, because that means that you can, if the muscle metaphor proves true enough, then you can just run through more processes than you thought you could. You just keep upping your capacity.
Yes, exactly, you know? Exactly.
But yeah, life figured out.
I think we did.
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident. I think we've closed enough loops.
There's something you mentioned about marble Which reminds me that shaping yourself as a sculpture that we all do. And I just kind of desperately wanted to close that loop.
I do want to close that loop. That...
Come on, close it. Close it right up.
Close it, bro. Close it. I can do this.
Okay.
I can do this.
This episode is brought to you by Friendster.
We can
it's
cut
still
gaps.
relevant.
We can take as long of pauses as we want. We can cut gaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't cut that part, though.
I won't. Friendster...
No, not Friendster. You saying that.
We can cut gaps.
This episode is also brought to you by chips. It's food.
I'm thinking... That's something about the way you chisel on the shape. Like, because the chisel is obviously the active force, and the shape is the inactive force. So the shape has to be, there's some parallel with the subconscious. And the act of chiseling has to be somehow paralleled with the conscience, because that's the
Totally
active
agree.
force
That's
being
a-
applied
yeah.
on it.
Completely agree.
But how to take that to the next level... Well, it's almost even like when you start, you have this amalgamous form.
Ooh, I got it.
Okay, go.
Mother ucka. So, you have an idea of the thing you're trying to make. So as you're chiseling away at the marble, right? There's a difference between the shape that you're imagining and the form that starts to take shape. And I would think that those variations in form, as it begins to become that thing, is kind of like the subconscious. That you have an intention, and it's continuously influencing this thing that is slightly not out of control, but slightly...
Well, even it's the same thing as like when you have an idea of what you want to draw on your head and you start drawing on paper, it doesn't come out exactly the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
You're like doing a portrait of your mom, and it looks like Tony Soprano, and yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because I was going to say it's when you have this sort of amalgamous form, when you start, you're taking sort of big random swings at this thing, trying to sort of, almost like you're teaching this marble the shape you want it to become.
That's really nice. I like that.
And then as it becomes more and more of a shape, you take smaller chisels because you're making more detailed things.
Yeah.
So it's almost like as you the Misakas are almost like your artistic ability, right? Where they start out in this like infantile stages, you're trying to figure it out, where you're kind of swinging random chunks off this thing to try to see if you can get a sense of what shape it could be. Mm-hmm. And then as they grow,
you literally become
grow this thing
better at sculpting, because by the end of it, you're making these really fine. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, so it's giving yourselves better tools to sculpt your sense of self.
Yeah.
And that's what Misakas are. It's the tools you use. It's increasing your artistic ability and giving yourself more tools to chisel away finer points and create a more beautiful and detailed sense of yourself that you have more control over.
Bada bing.
Loop closed.
Yeah. Can we call this episode like the bendy, twisty... Like, no, I wasn't actually coming with the title there. I just wanted to describe how it felt. There's a lot of bendy twisting. That was nice.
The bendy twisty. That was nice.
And on that bombshell,
We'll see you guys on the next one.